I'm Michael Gilligan. I'm the Chief Common Ground Officer of Seek Common Ground. Welcome to our Radical Hospitality Talk with Kathleen Campisano. Before we begin, I had a stroke earlier this year. I'm doing pretty well, but talking is a challenge. So I speak slowly and the words may not come out quite the way I'd like. Bear with me and ask me to repeat or clarify anything in the chat. It's okay. I won't be embarrassed. So now let me start. The Leadership Lab, where Kathleen is Deputy Director, is a program of the Los Angeles LGBT Center that works to reduce prejudice. They've earned a national reputation for practical, positive, non-judgmental ways to connect with voters. There's a link in the chat to a New York Times article on their groundbreaking work on deep canvassing. We met Kathleen a few years ago in Kalamazoo, Michigan, at a deep canvassing training. It was there we first encountered radical hospitality. Ever since, we've incorporated what we've experienced into our meetings and how we engage folks. We're excited to have Kathleen share more about radical hospitality, why the Leadership Lab and others practice it, and how you can incorporate it into your flow. Kathleen really would like this to be a dialogue, so be ready to ask questions using the chat function or the Q&A function, sorry, and engage with one another. Before Kathleen's remarks, let me do some quick housekeeping. The first half hour of today's session will be recorded for folks who can't join us live. The second half hour will be a live overtime discussion and not recorded. As I mentioned, please ask questions via the Q&A function, and we'll incorporate them into the discussion. If we don't get to them during the recorded portion of the call, we'll field them in overtime, which will again extend for half an hour. So we'll go to the top of the hour. So with that, I'm pleased to introduce Kathleen and hand it over to her. Thanks, Kathleen.
And hello, leaders. I am really thrilled to get to be talking with you all today about a topic that really has served me well, and I still feel excited about even after 35 years of organizing. So whether you consider yourself an organizer or a manager or a community program developer, most leaders, right, have a keen desire to build teams. We know that teams will be most effective, right, when they clearly know their common goals and objectives. They have been taught the skills to accomplish these objectives and have embraced what I like to think of as contagious attitudes, which allow for self-knowledge, growth, and full accountability to be vital and vibrant members of the team. So probably all of us here have a good working knowledge and a method of how to impart to our teams the knowledge and the skills needed to be successful. I'm just going to offer a few best practices that I've learned and developed about recognizing and infusing your team with the attitudes for acceptance and success. So I've called this attitudinal recognition and development radical hospitality after the faith-based concept of full invitation and acceptance. This idea began to happen when faith communities started to accept and acknowledge LGBTQ people among them. It's related to the much more broadly and more active engagement in Judaism called Repair of the World, or Tikkun Olam. So here's how it works. And I'm going to put my notes in the chat. I've got them on a Google Doc, so don't worry about writing down a lot of stuff. So I start with my own or your own self-knowledge. So I really begin to investigate, first off, what kind of people do I like to be around? And why do I like to be around them? What do I think those people's visible strengths are? And what might be their hidden strengths? I do the same with people who might put me off or might make me uncomfortable. And I go a little bit deeper, asking more why questions, so that I can really understand how my reactions, how my natural acceptance of people is really going to affect the team. I also take stock of how easily I can admit when I don't know something or someone, and I want to learn about them. This really is about curiosity, right? And our ability to be eager, I think, with things and people that we don't know about. I like to know my very own self-motivation for doing what I'm doing. You might think of this as, what inspires you to do this? How do you feel about this work? I asked the question several times, why do I like doing this? And why is it important to me? And finally, I really think about, how do I like to be treated when I make a mistake, right? And I know all of us want to be treated kindly, but some of us really want that criticism. We really want to know when we're doing something wrong so that we can correct it. And some of us need a little more gentle treatment. So the second thing is developing respectful curiosity. I think of curiosity, and maybe y'all do too, as the antidote to making assumptions. So by developing curiosity, I can easily ask myself the question, am I making assumptions about someone, and what are those assumptions? I work hard to develop and ask a number of questions to really get to know who each person is on my team, or even before they get on my team. And I reciprocate. I reveal to them exactly who I am. The third thing is to foster honesty and accountability as a through line for you and each member of your team. Now, this is probably something that we all really try to do, but I think it becomes attitudinally crucial that we get to understand, ask questions about our team and their work in a genuine way. Also, being able to know how we want things done. What are our expectations? And not just knowing them, but knowing how to impart them as honestly as we can. And the third thing about fostering accountability is getting very good at making a strong and clear ask of members on your team, and teach them to do the same thing. When people say no, celebrate that. Don't hold it against them. Understand that when people are setting boundaries, that's a good thing. It's not a terrible thing. If your team, like my team, is actively embracing a racial equity and inclusion stance, these questions also prompt building relationships across multiple lines of difference as well. So to get practical about this method could start with the very first time you meet someone, whether it's at an action, whether it's at a training, a multi-purpose meeting, or maybe it's just a one-on-one meeting, like maybe an interview. If it's a multi-purpose activity, then be sure that you have greeters at your team, not just somebody who's signing people in, but someone who really is up and moving and walking with the people that are coming to the seats that you've got assigned for them. This is a great way to begin to ask questions of the people who have come. And it's also a great way for your greeters to be able to reciprocate, right? A question I love to ask folks is, you know, what brought you here today? And then immediately share why I'm here today and why this is important work to me. I think the other thing, right in that same vein, is to give people a prompt to intentionally get to know each other right at the top of your meeting, right? If you have too big of a group and you don't want to go around and have everybody say their name and their pronoun and why they're here, pairing people up is just, it's a great substitute. And frankly, I like it even better. It really helps people feel more comfortable. It helps people get to know each other, and giving them an example from the top by saying why you're here and why you care about this is just a great way to begin to mentor those people who you want to be on your team. Continue making time in any of your team meetings for this kind of one-on-one sharing and this one-on-one getting to know each other. I feel like a team that is most comfortable with each other is a team that's really going to excel. So thank you for listening to some of the things that I think is important. I am ready and eager for any questions that you have.
Thank you, Kathleen. Folks, please post your questions in the Q&A function as we begin our discussion with Kathleen. So I'll get us started. As I mentioned, I met Kathleen and the Leadership Lab team in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And as she referenced, at that meeting, where I think there were probably 60 odd people, it was not a small meeting, but it was really kind of earth-shattering for me. I'd never experienced in all my decades of professional work such a warm and welcoming environment with people that I did not know. And so I was hoping that you might dig a little bit deeper in how the process worked. Like you could reference that meeting in particular if you recall it, but just how you institute the practice of radical hospitality with the meetings.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Well, I think in addition to having greeters and having what you might think of ushers moving people to their seats and getting to know them, I think another thing that you might do, especially in the beginning of your meeting, is to gather people in groups of, if you don't want to do 2, then groups of 3 or even groups of 4. Anything you can do to lessen any anxiety that folks might have coming into a new meeting. And, you know, some of us as leaders, we may have connected with ourselves enough so that anxiety is not present, but it's still present for so many people. And really thinking about what's going to ease this person into your new topic, what's going to ease them into a training, what's going to help them get to know and trust each other as well as you, I think is one of the things that you want to think about. When we do trainings at the Leadership Lab for canvases, we seldom train in a big group. Like, yes, there might be 40 or 50 of us, but we have broken them up into pods of 4 or 6. And we have a pod leader. Usually it's a volunteer leader who we've trained, who actually leads that person in the morning Canvas training before we go out. And we have found that that helps tremendously, both with content, but both with ease of conversation.
So how has your approach evolved over the years, or has it been constant? Have you found that there are elements that you've incorporated over the years, or has it been pretty much the same practice since you started?
Yeah. Well, there's no question that it's evolved. And the place where, of course, I get the best ideas is from the team that I'm creating, whether it's a team of volunteers or whether it's staff, really talking with folks about, not just what we're trying to accomplish, but how we're trying to do it. And really bringing that question of how would this be better? How would this training be better? How would canvassing one-on-one with people be better? And really hear what people have to say. This idea of trial and error has been something that's been part of my work as an organizer, where we think and plan about it, then we go and do it, and then we immediately evaluate it to see what's effective. And I would say that that's where a lot of our ideas come forward.
Could you share an example?
Well, I think the example of training people in small groups, we call these groups pods. We didn't always used to do that. We actually trained a room of, sometimes in our big trainings, we would have 100 people in a room. And the only thing that we did is we paired people up, right? Because when you go canvassing, you're paired with someone. But we tried to train from the front of the room, right? And we just noticed that in our debriefs and coming back, we weren't actually getting people to be as happy about the work as we wanted them to be. So as we thought about how could we do this, and of course the stumbling block there was, how can we find enough people to train to really get them, to be, competent trainers? And so that posed to be an easy problem to fix, time consuming, but easy to fix. And it made our team of volunteers so much more vital, so much more interested in being successful.
Okay, so could you share an example of someone's point of view, someone's perspective, someone's practice having shifted because of their introduction to radical hospitality?
Sure, sure. So we're real big on coaching people, right? We have a whole training mechanism of how to train coaches. Our idea of coaching is not telling people to do something, but asking a lot of questions to see what their challenges are. As we moved through especially some of the work we've done with voters in Southern California, what one person said to us, to me, one time is, I don't need your coaching, I just need your support. And it just blew me away. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to be a coach, and fan them off and give them some water and send them back in there. And sometimes people don't need that. So we have started an active practice now of talking about when we're supporting people and when we're coaching them to get back in. And sometimes this idea of support, really just listening, just really sitting with something, being grateful that somebody has just told you what's a challenge for them without trying to fix the challenge. Boy, that's been a real game changer.
So folks, don't be shy. This is your opportunity to engage with Kathleen as well. But you know me, I will fill the room if needed. So I want to talk to you about deep canvassing, but before I do, uh, what is what's a good first step for like some of the folks that we have, some of the leaders we have are planning to get back out into the field, to start meeting with people again. So what would you recommend as a good first step to uh, introduce the concept of radical hospitality into their meetings?
Yeah, that's really a great question. You know, I think actually making the statement that not only are we looking at our team and our team's goals from a place of skill and from a place of knowledge, but also from our place of attitude. Sometimes I like to say, how I get the work done is as important as achieving my goal, as achieving the what of my work. And I think that might be just doing some investigating one-on-one, or just bring that up as a topic with your team. Are we paying attention to how we're doing the work as well as what we're achieving? And just see what popcorn's out, just see what happens. What do people bring? And then be able to talk about that. The thing about being a leader, I know y'all know this, but we don't have to have all the answers. That's why we have a team. So really being able to listen to your team, especially about this, how they want to get the work done, might be really might be a game changer for some of you.
That's a great answer and a great way to approach the work. Let me ask a question that did come in over the Q&A function. Can you talk a little bit about how you deal with language barriers? Some folks have multiple primary languages that they are dealing with their constituencies. So how do you deal with it?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And, right now, because we're canvassing in Southern California, actually in Costa Mesa, California, which is a small community that is, 35% of Spanish descent. And so we didn't always do a great job of intentionally recruiting canvassers that spoke Spanish. I like to say that we're doing a better job now. In addition, we're actually inviting people who maybe are not feeling that canvassing is their forte, or they're a little nervous to talk to strangers, but they speak Spanish. So we're asking them to come out with us to be a translator. In addition, all of our scripts are in Spanish. And so sometimes we're getting good at asking for us that only speak English, is there a person who speaks both English and Spanish in the house? Sometimes people, might be able to speak a little bit of English, but they're nervous about it. Handing them our Spanish script as we go through it to talk with them really has worked well, for sure. But there's no substitute for just having enough people who speak Spanish on your team, for sure.
Here's another question that came in through the chat. As I alluded to, people are beginning to plan meetings and coming out from under COVID. So any recommendation, any techniques for engaging in radical hospitality with mindful of burnout from COVID or the isolation that it has bred?
Yeah, yeah, boy, absolutely. I think we're still coming up with some of those. I think because we moved to doing Zoom so early You know, in 2020, we were out canvassing door to door, actually in Pennsylvania, for the presidential election. So in March, we moved to Zoom and we stayed in Zoom. And so we had to come up first with some radical hospitality practices in Zoom, right? So that people didn't, you know, just, I don't know, that we made Zoom friendlier. And I think we did an okay job of that. When we came back out, and as we were coming back out and more people are joining us back here in California, I think people themselves are just excited to be there. And so, you know, we might start our training at 11, but we make sure that we've got a hospitality of spread in the morning, you know, of power bars and fruit and water, sometimes coffee. And, you know, we invite people to get there and get parked by 10:45 so that they can have some hospitality and camaraderie with their folks. Our debriefs are something that we do over lunch. And we really make sure that we give enough time so that people can have some casual conversation about their conversations with voters as much as possible. Yeah, so these are a couple of things that we're doing.
So a follow-up on that is if you could share any tips and tricks for engaging in radical hospitality over Zoom, that would be appreciated.
Yeah, so for those of you, anybody who's been a trainer and moved from a live audience to Zoom, you know the challenges that you have. I have to say, the first time I did a Zoom training, I was way more nervous than any time I'd ever done anything live. And so what we started doing is actually having, you know, a hospitality team. The hospitality team would be on the Zoom. They would be the people that would welcome folks. They would be, you know, they might have a couple of fun questions to ask people, to get people to put stuff in the chat as they were coming in. And, you know, that really helped warm up the group. Also for some of our trainings, again, we stayed in the big Zoom room for about the first 10 minutes that to really make sure everybody had the same kind of information. And then we moved people into breakout rooms. We found breakout rooms to be awesome. Again, a leader in a breakout room, doing some introductions there. Sometimes we went back and forth, but you know, it's just still just being as personal as you can with people is one of the things that we found.
Here's a question that came in over the Q&A function. It's critically important. It's an excellent question. How do you approach young people who might be hesitant to receive help or be vulnerable?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I think being curious about people or asking people questions or getting to know people and having them feel comfortable has to do with how much we're able to reciprocate with that, right? And so, you know, asking somebody who's in their 20s, you know, so have you ever canvassed before, is a whole different kind of concept, right? Than asking somebody who might be 35 or 40 or even older. So changing the question, it's like, you know, have you ever talked to strangers about something that you feel is important before? Or how much do you like getting to know, you know, people? What's your trick of getting to know people, right? It's something that feels like it is, yes, you're getting some of the same information, both knowledge about the person as well as helping them feel comfortable with you, but it's more in their own vernacular. It's more in their own circumstance of life. Yeah, I'd say the same thing is probably true. Me as a white person talking with BIPOC people. Me as an older person, absolutely talking with younger people. Yeah, it just, being aware. That's why I think that first
Mhm.
part of radical hospitality, where you're asking yourself questions, so you get to know, like, what are my strengths in getting to know people and helping them feel
Mhm.
comfortable, and where do I feel a little uncomfortable, or that I might need a little more knowledge.
Let me close the recorded portion of our talk today, and invite people to the informal overtime, where I certainly want to learn more about deep canvassing from you. But my closing question for you, Kathleen, is who's someone who's influenced you?
Um, yeah, I think this early on, I became I wanted to know as much about kind of the nature of curiosity as I probably could. And so I would say Fred Russ Sr., as well
Mhm.
as the organizing work that he did, for sure. And then some contemporaries of mine that I met in the early days of organizing, Rodney McKenzie, who's now an officer over at Fetzer Institute, and then Sarah Reese, who's the senior strategist at the National LGBTQ Task Force. They were folks that really were both gentle with me and firm with
Mhm.
me about the things I did well and the things, I screwed up pretty often. And so I really found that kind of mentorship, that kind of friendship even, to be pretty important. And, and they still, I think, if I'm stuck on something, sometimes they're the people that I go to.
Thanks, Kathleen, and thank you all for joining us, and please join me in thanking Kathleen for sharing her insights.